What began in 1861 after the first shots were fired in Fort Sumter, the Civil War was the most bloody and perhaps one of the most significant events in the American history. Not only did it shake the foundation of the South, but also brought forth a new era of civil liberties.
The South had been accustomed to the concept of slavery for as long as they could remember, and as the United States continued to expand west, the Southerners felt that it was okay for slavery to expand as well.
The American public had their mind set on expanding the nation across North America. They felt as if they were destined by God to spread the democracy and liberties of the United States. This was referred to as their manifest destiny. The northern states had completely given up slavery for decades and opposed the southern institution. They were a much more advanced people and believed that slavery hindered the economy.
The Southerners depended so heavily on slavery, while the North had established industries that required a labor force. Therefore, not only did the North believe the South was taking economic opportunities by extending slavery, but some also considered it morally wrong.
The increasing tensions between the two regions eventually led the Southerners to believe that they didn't have an equal representation in government. The South felt their rights of property were being violated as the North continued their efforts to stop slavery. When Abraham Lincoln, a man who considered slavery immoral, was victorious in the election of 1860, the Southerners felt it was necessary for them to secede, and so came the Confederate States of America.
Lincoln understood the importance of keeping the United States together, and therefore wasn't reluctant in calling the nation to assemble the army. Men all over the nation enlisted themselves in the war effort. Over 3 million men fought in the Civil War. Most of them had voluntarily enlisted.
Both the North and the South had a lot of volunteers, but the Union Army had a clear advantage when it came to numbers. Over the course of the war, almost 2.5 million men fought for the Union cause, while only 1 million fought for the Confederates.
Although soldiers on both ends were poorly trained and lacked proper clothing, equipment, and nourishment, the Northern soldiers tended to be better cared for than those of the South.
In the North, the men who enlisted were usually in their 20s. These were young men who left their jobs and farms to fight for the preservation of their nation. For them, the idea of enlisting represented a great honor and sense of patriotism.
Although the Southern enlistees were fighting for different causes, their determination and motivation was very similar to that of the North's. These men were fighting for their homes and their way of life. Their property and Southern institution meant a lot to them.
Yet the eagerness of the Americans in the North slowly declined, and the number of volunteers began to diminish. Thus, the government was forced to pass drafting laws that required men as young as 17 to as old as 35 to enlist in the war.
The drafting laws caused many of the soldiers to resent fighting in the war. This hurt their morale and even led some to desert. Those who had deserted and were caught were often severely punished and even executed.
Although the people of the Union, as well as the Confederacy, hated and feared these drafts, the government needed them to keep an adequate amount of soldiers in the army. The rich were able to avoid being drafted by paying a sum of $300 or hiring someone to take their spot in the war.
Many soldiers spent their days in the war being homesick and longing for a chance to be with their families. Some lost the friends or brothers they had enlisted with and lost the hope to continue fighting.
How much would I enjoy a walk with my Jenny this evening along the levee, if the war was only over. It would be a sad sight to you, my love, as we would walk along to see the soldiers' graves reaching away along the levee for miles, just as close as they can be made. My dear, you would count them by hundreds. There they sleep, poor boys, far from home. They died too without mother, sister, or wife to administer to their comfort. Oh, how sad I feel whenever I think of them. Samuel D. Lougheed, May 1863.
This war was very mobile, especially for the North. These soldiers would march for miles into Southern territory and had very intense drills.
We are having drills, mounted and dismounted, every day. I am getting so tired and sleepy after my long ride of about 35 miles today that I believe I will postpone riding further until tomorrow morning. Captain James A. Sayles, June 1864.
Not only did the men from the Union Army have to walk for miles in their effort to cover Southern ground, but they would be carrying these knapsacks that could easily end up weighing 50 pounds.
But not all soldiers were lucky enough to be provided with one of these knapsacks. Many soldiers carried the few things they had brought from home as they headed out to fight.
If you were to imagine what a Confederate soldier would look like, you would think of a man in a gray hat and a navy jacket and trousers, while for a Union soldier, you would imagine a man in a black jacket and blue trousers.
But there was another way the soldiers of the two ends distinguished one another. A soldier of the Confederacy would be unshaven, dirty, clothed in ragged and overworn uniforms, while the Union's men were required to maintain a proper appearance.
Therefore, they had supplies like combs, razors, and personal hygiene products and their knapsacks.
On average, a day for a soldier would consist of roll calls, drills, and a few inspections. Once these were done, the soldiers were left with a long day with nothing much to do.
When weary, footsore, hungry, and dispirited, you must seek your hard pillow without a single word of cheer, comfort, or soothing from any loved and loving one of the home friends. Leeman Whitney Strong, January 1862.
Boredom was something many of these soldiers considered an obstacle. They spent their evenings around campfires debating the war and the direction in which it was heading.
Some men played various board games with their comrades, while others devoted their time to writing to their families and friends back home.
The men invented all sorts of funny jokes to keep up their spirits. This caused us a fine laugh. Many such little jokes were played off during the tedious march. Riley M. Huskinson, 1863.
Some of the soldiers relied on music to help them pass the time. The drums and bugles were very popular among the different infantries.
On January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This decision impacted not only the slaves who were freed, but the war and its soldiers as well.
With the Emancipation Proclamation, the war had a clear purpose towards slavery. Not only was the Union fighting to keep the United States a whole, but it also wanted to end slavery.
For some of the Union soldiers, this seemed like a betrayal. They had enlisted to fight for the preservation of the Union, and only that. But now slavery was also a cause of the war.
Following the Emancipation Proclamation, there was a decline in morale for those who felt betrayed, an increase in desertions, but a wave of cheers from the Northern abolitionists. There was also the beginning of African American involvement in the war as soldiers.
President Lincoln saw what an advantage the African American men could be for the Union cause and encouraged them to enlist as soldiers.
Great is the outpouring of the colored people that is now rallying with their hearts of lions against that very curse that has separated you and me. Oh, what a happy time that will be when this ungodly rebellion shall be put down, and the curses of our land is trampled under our feet. I am a soldier now, and I shall use my utmost endeavor to strike at the rebellion and the heart of the system that has so long kept us in chains. Samuel Cabell, 1863.
Still, the black soldiers didn't receive the same honor and dignity for fighting in the war as the whites did. These soldiers were paid a lot less than the white soldiers.
Although the black man was free and was not entitled to his freedom, he still wasn't seen as equal in the white man's perspective. The average black soldier received a pay of $7 per month compared to the white soldier who received $13.
The African American infantries weren't given the same respect as the whites. These infantries would often be sent to battle first to weaken the other side and therefore would end up losing the most men.
All in all, over 600,000 men died in the Civil War. The casualties in this war were larger than in any other war the United States has ever fought.
At minimum, there were 600,000 deaths. 200,000 were soldiers who died on the battlefield. The rest of them died from diseases and captivity.
The Civil War was an especially difficult war because it put countrymen against each other. Men who otherwise would have considered themselves brothers were now fighting for each other's lives.
As Lincoln said, we were a divided house, brother against brother.